Welcome. The title of this presentation is How Can Organizations Reduce Stress and Increase Satisfaction and Well-Being in Employees? Worker well-being and health is very important, so much so that sometimes in extreme cases it can have serious consequences. For example, Foxconn, one of the world's largest electronics maker, which serves global brands such as Apple, Dell, and Hewlett-Packard, in 2010 experienced a wave of suicides among its workers at a pair of factories, 9 and 1 to be exact. It became such a serious issue that Foxconn installed suicide nets outside their quarters to prevent further employees from falling to their deaths. And this quote is indicative of why these workers felt compelled to jump to their deaths. Foxconn's production line system is designed so well that no worker will rest even 1 second during work. They make sure you're always busy for every second. This is a very extreme case. However, we can't say this is cultural related. Organizations, employees, and laborers have experienced this throughout history, and no culture or any time in history has been immune to such harsh and extreme working conditions. Sources of work-related stress have been identified, such as physical working, which is obvious. Your working conditions, your cubicle where you work, the lighting, temperature, and the environment, noise, how many hours you work, going to and from work, you travel. Some employees travel up to 2 hours a day to go to and home from work. Also, role ambiguity is a situation where role expectations can become unclear and employees are not sure what is exactly expected from them. Also, role conflict is when role expectations are inconsistent and basically an employee is getting mixed signals from their manager to supervisor. Also, two types of stress is episodic stress, which is considered from basic life experiences, and chronic stress, which can be consistent, prolonged, and debilitating, and which could, as in the case of those workers from Foxconn, can produce the most extreme results. And also burnout is when employees become so stressed they basically experience exhaustion and depersonalization. Also, besides stress is strains, job-related strains is related to your job and how you're motivated by it. Your lack of satisfaction and motivation will lead to minimal effort, being absent, and low productivity. There's also a second category, emotional strains, which is emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, reduced personal accomplishments, as I just mentioned. And the third one is physiological nature. This is basically how, when your job becomes so stressful begins to adversely affect your health. When we hear about, for instance, in the stock market, when sometimes people have heart attacks from the stress. However, there are ways to manage stress and coping with stress at work. The APA, they've uh, suggest tracking your stressors, just basically identifying what's triggering you, what's bothering you, maybe to record these events in a journal or diary. Also develops a healthy response instead of just, they mean in eating or alcohol or maybe using some type of recreational drugs. You could do something healthy like exercise or meditation, reading. They suggest establishing boundaries. This means basically not bringing your work at home, shutting off your phone at a certain time during the night so no one can call you or reach you. You have to recharge, relax. That's pretty obvious. And they suggest talking to your supervisor. And I would say, if you're going to talk to your supervisor about your condition, you should converse and not confront. Otherwise, it may seem like you are demanding changes with your job tasks. Hopefully, the supervisor will understand, and also to seek some support. And usually, they suggest friends or family members, but sometimes family and friends may mean well, but they may say, "Oh, it'll be okay," or "Just pace yourself, everything will work out." Sometimes that's not the answer, and you should probably seek to speak to a professional. Some organizations today have and provide someone for you to speak to if you request. Job satisfaction and job attitudes. Attitude is described as a positive or negative feeling toward a person or a place or a thing, and the antecedents, as described in Levy, is considered job characteristics. This is basically the characteristics of your job, your skills you're using, the variety of skills you're using, your task identity, the significance of your tasks. Are you autonomous, or is your boss or supervisor constantly looking over your shoulder and criticizing or telling you how to do every little detail of your job? It involves your individual personal characteristics. This is basically your makeup. How do you respond to environmental stimuli? This is predetermined. Are you basically, this is your makeup, how you will react to stress and challenges. Also, how members of employees view themselves as members of the organization. This is called organization-based self-esteem. How do you view yourself in the grand scheme of things? Also, social factors, relationships with supervisors and coworkers, growth opportunities, an employee's perception of opportunities in their organization. Is it a dead-end job? Ask yourself, do I lack the skills or credentials to advance? Is there a glass ceiling? And finally, performance. And usually job satisfaction is a very good predictor of performance. And organizational commitment. How committed is the employee to the organization? Are they emotionally invested in the organization? Or are they just basically collecting a paycheck? Next is motivation, work motivation, which involves several theories. Basically, these theories involve it compares and contrasts individuals' needs and values and goals, the employees' needs and values and goals. What are they seeking? What do they want? What are they expecting out of their job? And will it be met by the employer or organization? And motivators are described as basically if we take a moment to reflect how important motivation is, it starts the night before, going to bed at a decent hour, then waking up at early to get to work on time, and then being productive during the workday, and then do it again the next day, and so on. So motivation is very important, and it's important for employers to find ways to keep employees motivated. Next are the environment determinants of well-being. Actually, I believe that's a typo. Environmental determinants of well-being. And it's WAR's 10 environmental determinants of well-being. He identified 10. Basically, I'll list a few of them. But he states that the more employees experience these determinants of the job, the less likely they are to experience negative well-being, which, according to War, is reflected in anxiety, displeasure, depression, and he lists five of them are opportunity for control, opportunity for skill use. Can you put your skills to use, or are they just going to waste? Variety at your job. Are you just stuck doing the same thing every day? Environmental clarity, and valued social position, in which an employee feels or gains a sense of prestige and accomplishments from their work. And we also must consider life outside of the workplace. And this is work-family conflict and work-family. When is it? When does it become too much where you can't manage your job, career, and your family life, and it causes stress? And like I said, a sense of purpose. Your job can give you a great sense of purpose, of being productive, being wanted, uh, developing goals, your relationships at work. And also, this is a rather funny one. Does your job identify who you are? Do you feel, or do you catch yourself whenever you converse with a acquaintance, a friend, or family member, the conversation is dominated by your job and what you do? So you want to avoid being uh, your job doesn't make you. Next, we have organizational development interventions. These are interventions which can be introduced to sort of brighten things up at work, if, of course, management and executives allow. And effective interventions are the ones that best fit the organization. This was a very, as we had in that assignment of the laid back founders of the company, it would have been very foolish to introduce drastic change in that case. And these are several processes. Survey feedback, of course. You want to collect information. What's making people happy? What are they concerned about? Total quality management focuses on employee involvement in the control and quality in organizations? Are they involved? Do employees have a say? And of course, last is positive organizational development. And this is in recent years, psychology in the 90s, positive psychology. This is the study of strengths in individuals and organizations. It's no longer about focusing on weaknesses and what's wrong, but rather identifying strengths and building upon them. And this is a good segue to our final slide, increasing happiness. And that's a quote: the well-being of employees is also in the best interest of employers who spend substantial resources hiring employees and generating profits. Now, this is not to say that uh, employers or organizations should go out of their way to make every employee happy, but this is from the Sean Acker from his TEDx conference, and he describes that the usual formula is: if I work harder, I'll be more successful, and if I'm more successful, then I'll be happier. Well, he argues that this is not the case, and this is actually the opposite. He argues we need to be happier, increase our happiness in order to be more successful and work harder. So he's actually saying that if we can increase our happiness, then everything else will follow. And he stated that 75% of job successes are predicted by optimism levels. And then he describes the happiness advantage, which is if we can raise someone's level of positivity in the present, then their brain experiences what we now call the happiness advantage. So it's basically, in short, he's describing about changing your perception, becoming happier and increasing happiness in order to become more successful and work harder. So that concludes it. Thank you. And it's followed by the references.